hits all the time.
We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Klaff. The postseason is here. We've got playoff baseball at Camden Yards, and the Orioles are on a roll. Swept the Minnesota Twins. They are winners of 4 of their last 5 of their last 6, something like that. I don't know. They've won a lot of their recent games. They're on a roll. The mojo is back. Jordan Westbury said it this morning. The Orioles feel like they're back, and it could not have happened at a better time.
Yeah, despite the gray skies and rain, it's definitely October, and it feels like it as well. You're happy going into today knowing the last few weeks that they've had, especially how September did start. So things feel good. Lineup feels not too many surprises. I'm sure we'll go over that in just a few seconds. So feels good here in Birdland.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the lineup later. We're going to take a deep dive into this Game 1 matchup. Just like our rec soccer team with me in attendance, the Orioles are trying to go 2-0 here in the wild card. Don't need a Game 3, although if they did need a Game 3, then hopefully they would get that done as well, much like our rec soccer team. But anyway, let's start with the Orioles postseason roster. 26 players, and the Orioles opt to go with 14 position players and 12 pitchers, which is something that we see pretty frequently around baseball because you only need a maximum of 3 starting pitchers in the wild card series. So most teams opt to go for an extra position player and just, maintain the bullpen and just drop a starting pitcher. For the Orioles, that was Albert Suarez. I know based on the name and what he has done this season, you might be a little bit surprised to not see Albert Suarez on the wild card roster. That is not any sort of indication of how the Orioles view him for the playoffs. In fact, I think it's completely the opposite of that, because this indicates to me that the Orioles view him as a potential starter for the ALDS. If the Orioles saw Suarez as a bullpen piece, then he would have been on this wild card roster because he would have been an option in a high leverage spot at some point during this series against the Royals. But the Orioles clearly see him as the number 4 guy. And if the Orioles were to win this series against the Royals, if they take it in 2 games, then we would maybe see Albert Suarez in Game 2 of the ALDS. If it takes 3 games, then maybe Albert Suarez pitches Game 1 of the ALDS if the Orioles have to play straight from Tuesday through Thursday and then into Saturday. So don't freak out about Albert Suarez not being on this roster. It just means that he is going to be a starter if the Orioles advance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it makes sense, especially when you look at just the month of September. If you're deciding between Dean Kremer and Albert Suarez, it does make sense. Kremer had a much better September than Suarez. I mean, Suarez's ERA was 6.20 last month versus Kremer's 2.25. So you trust him going in that Game 3, having Dean Kremer there if you need to make that happen, if you're not winning the first 2. But you're right. I do think that the O's still have faith in Suarez, whether that be for the next round or not, because he has been that clutch guy for so many parts throughout the season. When Grayson Rodriguez was injured, when Kyle Bradish was out. So definitely not someone to lose hope on just because the Orioles haven't decided to bring him onto this wild card roster.
Yeah, and Cade Povich makes this roster as well. I think it's as a bullpen piece. I would have to imagine that the Orioles would like to avoid starting Cade Povich at some point, and that's nothing against Cade Povich. He has looked really good, especially down the stretch, but you don't want to throw a rookie pitcher in the playoffs. So I think Cade Povich is more than likely on this roster because if the Orioles, you hope this doesn't happen, but if there is a blow-up game and the Orioles just need somebody to go out and pitch 4 or 5 innings and just clean it up and save the bullpen and get to tomorrow, Cade Povich is probably that guy.
Yeah, and I think that that's another guy. I mean, with Suarez, too, you have that versatility. You have that faith in him both, whether you're starting a game or as a reliever, and I think Cade Povich goes the same way, but I do expect Povich to most likely be just a reliever and kind of give more of that depth, especially if you do have to play game 3 but you are winning, you could bring Povich in, give Kramer some rest, and then make up some time and give him some rest for the next round if that's possible.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Povich comes in any sort of higher leverage situation. Yeah. I think you would have to be up a lot of runs for Cade Povich to enter a game, or vice versa. You would probably have to be down a good chunk for Povich to be in there, but it's a valuable arm to have, because as much as you don't want to run into a situation where you are down a bunch of runs, if you have somebody that can give you 4 or 5 innings and save your bullpen so you're not just throwing up the white towel for the next few games, Cade Povich is a good guy to have on the roster for that. Really no surprises in terms of the position players. You are maybe going to see some cuts for the ALDS. I think more than likely you are going to see some cuts for the ALDS, where the Orioles, I would imagine, will either go back to the 13-13 even split between position players and pitchers, or I could even see them going with 14 pitchers and 12 position players if they want a shorter bench. But as of right now, for the wild card, you've got 14 position players, which means the guys that were on the bubble, Jackson Holliday, Austin Slater, Emmanuel Rivera, maybe you could throw Heston Kjerstad in that conversation as well. Those 4 guys, all safe for the wild card.
Yeah, and I think also no surprises here as well, because we heard lots of conversations, well, okay, is it going to be Holliday or Rivera? But luckily you get both of them here, and I think you can use them in different ways, both to advantages. I mean, Holliday will be great to have him as a pinch hitter or pinch runner, especially maybe today against Cole Reagans, that we'll talk about as well. And then obviously having him as the fastest player outside of Jorge Mateo on the Orioles is going to be huge for pinch running situations. And Emmanuel Rivera, of course, had a huge series in Minnesota, especially in Game 2, went 4 for 4, 1 double, 2 homers, 4 RBIs. And he's batting .305 and slugging .542 in the month of September. So I think that he crept his way into this roster, especially in the last few series, and really proved himself. And he'll be a good option for infield depth.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation we're going to have for the DS in terms of who makes that roster there, but you got to get there first, and it's nice that the Orioles don't have to make that decision yet, and they can have a deep bench and play guys really situationally, which Brandon Hyde likes to do, and it's a valuable thing to be able to do in the playoffs. Really, the only surprise on this wildcard roster is Colin Selby making it over Matt Bowman. Bowman, we have seen more throughout the season. Selby is just a really good stuff guy. Brandon Hyde mentioned that this morning when he was talking about the roster. I don't think Selby or Bowman really would have factored into a high leverage late inning situation. I don't think they find themselves in that group, but Selby has good stuff. We saw it in very brief stints up in the majors this year, so it's an exciting arm. I don't think, yes, it is a surprise, but I don't think it's an incredibly consequential surprise. I think Bowman and Selby are probably both 5th, 6th inning relievers rather than 7th, 8th, 9th. So, yes, it is surprising, but you're probably not looking at this roster up in arms that Colin Selby made it over Matt Bowman.
Yeah, and it was kind of a giveaway on Sunday by the O's recalling Selby, so you kind of got that idea that why recall someone if you're not going to bring them onto the wild card roster. But you're right, not too many surprises with this bullpen, especially because this is an Orioles bullpen that really hasn't had a distinct closer or specific guys for set innings, and it's very much been a team kind of bullpen effort. And we'll see that down the stretch, but I do think you get Dominguez going in as a 9th inning arm and then kind of swapping it around, especially with matching up, because there's 5 out of 9 of these guys on this reliever roster are lefties, and that's kind of a good selling point, especially bringing back Danny Coulomb and bringing him in like that had been the hope all year long once he went out for injury.
Yeah, and the other nice part of this in a shortened 3-game wildcard series, you have 11 relievers.
Yeah.
It's Aiken, Cano, Coulomb, Dominguez, Perez, Povich, Selby, Soto, Webb. Like that's a lot of relievers to go along with your 3 starting pitchers. So that is nice flexibility to have for the Orioles, and Brandon Hyde will be able to I did my math wrong, by the way, as I'm saying that.
Yeah, wait, I said 9, but maybe
you have 9 relievers. You're correct. You have 3 starting pitchers and 9 relievers, which is still a deeper bullpen than you were accustomed to during the regular season. So nice for Brandon Hyde to be able to maneuver in that way. Some more breaking news from yesterday. On the other side, Vinny Pasquantino is back for the Royals. He made a really quick recovery from injury, and he is back for the Wild Card Series. Good for baseball to have good players back in the playoffs. Bad for the Orioles that the Royals have another good lineup piece, because when you look at the Royals lineup, they are pretty top heavy. It is really, Bobby Witt Jr. is one of the best baseball players on the planet. Again, in any other season where Aaron Judge doesn't exist, Bobby Witt Jr. and his WAR close to 10 and OPS close to 1,000 and batting average of 330 wins the MVP. He is an absolute X factor, and that you have to account for him, obviously, going into a series like this.
His whole StatCast page almost is in the red.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Bobby Witt Jr. is a bona fide superstar. Outside of Bobby Witt Jr., you've got Vinny Pasquantino, Salvador Perez, Michael Massey. They're the only other hitters in this Royals lineup with an OPS above 700 this season. And Pasquantino, the Pasquatch, as they like to call him. If you saw the Royals kind of weird Twitter graphic this morning, it was a little scary with the Sasquatch holding the bat. But the Pasquatch is good. 19 home runs, close to 100 RBIs, OPS of 822 in the second half of the season. For a lineup that doesn't have a lot of thumpers, getting Pasquantino back is a massive, massive X factor, especially when you're considering that the Orioles are probably going to go with Corbin Burnes, Zach Eflin, Dean Kramer, 3 right-handed pitchers against Pasquantino, who is their best left-handed hitter.
Yeah, it definitely brings an extra intimidation factor into this wild card series, especially, the Orioles have gotten back Westberg, Mountcastle, Arias, and now they're getting back Pasquantino. It's kind of bringing it closer to October, and it's a big deal. And like you said, his recovery time was way quicker than expected. It was supposed to be a 6 to 8 week recovery time after having thumb surgery, and it is exactly on the day 4 weeks ago that he underwent thumb surgery. So that's huge, and especially to be going back into the lineup slotted as third today. So that'll be a tough task for Corbin Burnes, but obviously have faith in the guy. He's had an incredible September. But this is a guy, Pasquantino, who is in the 96th percentile for strikeout and whiff rates this season, so it's going to be a tough undertaking. Yeah,
the Royals in general do not strike out. They are 29th in baseball in strikeouts in the good way, as in they do not strike out. They're going to make a lot of contact, but they're also not going to walk a ton. It's kind of a weird lineup construction where they make a lot of contact. They're kind of middle of the road in batting average, middle of the road in OPS. They're 19th in baseball and on-base percentage, despite being 29th in strikeouts, second best in baseball in strikeouts, because they're 28th in baseball in walks. They don't walk a lot. It's not a super intimidating lineup. It's kind of an average lineup. 20th in baseball in home runs, 14th in OPS. So on the surface, you feel pretty good about Corbin Burnes and Zach Eflin and Dean Kramer in this series, but getting Pasquantino back makes this lineup feel very, very different, especially, like I said, he is their best left-handed hitter against 3 right-handed starters for the Orioles. So I'm not terrified of the lineup. I'm terrified of Bobby Witt Jr., and I'm nervous about Vinny Pasquantino and Salvador Perez, but it's not a super intimidating lineup.
Yeah, it's an interesting...
Which is famous last words, I know.
True. It's an interesting one because the Royals obviously had a really strong season despite this September pretty much, and later in the second half, they went on a 7-game losing streak. They're batting .203 in September, so it's definitely one that the Orioles can't lose sight of playing down to the opponents in that sense, because I do think that the Orioles do have more talent throughout the entire lineup. It's just a matter of actually bringing and keeping the momentum that they've had for the last few weeks, whereas the Royals have been struggling.
Yeah, and there's names in the bottom of the lineup for Kansas City. Batting 5th today, you've got Yoli Gurriel. Batting 7th, you've got Tommy Pham. Those are names. They just haven't been awesome this year. The Orioles lineup is out as well, and it is a lineup that I think we were anticipating, because when you look at Cole Reagans and just who has been playing well for the Orioles, this lineup makes a lot of sense. Gunnar Henderson leading off, playing shortstop. Jordan Westberg, Anthony Santander, Ryan Mountcastle follow him. Mountcastle is playing first base. Adley Rutschman behind him as your designated hitter. Colton Cowser behind Rutschman as your left fielder. And then your 7, 8, 9, Ramon Arias at third, Cedric Mullins in center field, and James McCann catching. I think that lineup makes a lot of sense. We're going to talk about these two starting pitchers because they are the story of the day. But this is the lineup. But before the lineup was even out, as we were doing the prep for this show, this is the lineup that I thought we would see because James McCann has been scorching in September. He has been getting the long ball working. It's been great. He has caught Corbin Burns for his last few starts as well, where Corbin Burns has been really, really good. You don't want to mess with any of the mojo there. McCann has been calling great games. Burns has been throwing great games. Makes sense to keep him behind the plate as a right-handed hitter against the left-handed starter in Cole Reagans. Cedric Mullins is in the lineup as well. That could come as a little bit of a surprise, given Mullins' stats against left-handed pitching this year. Austin Slater, I know not this year in terms of the splits, but Austin Slater over the course of his career has been a lot better against left-handed pitching than Cedric Mullins has been recently. But when you look at Cedric Mullins in the month of September, he has been probably the Orioles' second best hitter in this lineup behind Gunnar Henderson, who has had a fantastic month. And on the bump for the Royals is Cole Reagans, who is a reverse splits pitcher. He is really, really good against right-handed hitting. And lefties are hitting .276 with a .341 on-base percentage and a .723 OPS. .723 OPS isn't incredibly high, but against an ace like Cole Reagans, that's still a good OPS. So Cedric Mullins, Colton Cowser still getting the start today despite being a left-on-left matchup because that's how Reagans pitches.
Yeah, and I'm really glad, just to mention this quickly, I'm really glad that McCann is behind the plate there. I think that is going to kind of keep the same, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, where if you have McCann catching for Burns the last 3 games, just keep it that way. I like it, and like you mentioned, McCann has been hitting very well in the month of September. So I like that decision for sure. And then, like you said, keeping Mullins and Cowser in the lineup will be huge. It is very interesting to see Reagans with his caliber in the month that he's had in September, where it was literally just a 1.08 ERA this past month, which was huge. But again, it is the reverse splits, and I think that'll be interesting to see as well when if you bring Holiday in at some point, whether Reagans stays in throughout a certain amount of innings as well. And lots of other lefty hitters that this O's lineup could use. So I think Mullins, Cowser will be huge in the lineup, both offensively and defensively, so that's not a huge surprise as well.
Yeah, Cole Reagans and Corbin Burns are probably the 2 hottest pitchers in baseball over the course of the last month. Let's start with Cole Reagans on the mound for the Royals. 32 starts, a .314 ERA, a whip just over 1,100, 10.8 strikeouts per 9, which leads the American League, and he doesn't walk a ton of guys, just over 3 walks per 9 innings. And in his 4 starts in September, 25 innings, 3 total earned runs, an ERA, as you mentioned, of just 1.08. Opponents hitting 169 with a .515 OPS, 26 strikeouts. And 3 of his 4 starts have been against the Tigers, Yankees, and Twins. I know the Twins had struggled a little bit over the last few weeks, but they were fighting for their playoff lives. Fell short, but that's still a good lineup and a good team. And then the Tigers and Yankees in the playoffs as well. Cole Reagans is really, really good. And I know when you were looking at the 2 matchups of, okay, do I want to see the Tigers or do I want to see the Royals? A lot of people said the Royals because you wanted to avoid Tarek Skubal. I don't know how much better seeing Cole Reagans is, especially the way that he has pitched over the last month. It is devastating stuff. Top 12 in baseball in Stuff Plus, according to Fangraphs. And the Orioles are just going to have a really hard time. It is tough going up against Reagans because right-handers really, really struggle. And conventional wisdom would tell you that you want to stack your lineup with right-handers. That's not the case with Reagans based on his pitch movement.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't the first time that the O's are seeing Reagans this season. They saw him twice in April. Yes, it's a long way away, especially with all the injuries that have gone on between the Orioles and whatnot and all the changes in the roster and lineup. But still, it could be a very similar kind of takeaway that the Orioles had between the first meeting with Reagans, where his changeup absolutely annihilated the Orioles, and he got 0 earned runs against the O's here at Camden Yards. But then the second outing, just a few weeks later, it was only 1 2/3 innings with 7 earned runs. That is his worst start all season. So getting that, the O's kind of took what they needed to learn from his changeup and kind of sat on that a little bit in that second outing. So I think going into today, they're going to use that to the best of their knowledge and go with that again. I mean, you were talking to Ben McDonald yesterday, and he said that a key for the O's is to kind of just sit on that changeup and make sure that they're focusing on one type of pitch for Reagans. And when that wears out, then you're going to get an easier, like a splitter or something like that.
Yeah, Reagans is the type of pitcher that has really nasty stuff and doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And against a pitcher like that, you kind of have to go up looking for something in an 0-0 count. And when you get behind, you're really in trouble because he'll punch you out. Cole Reagans has 2 elite pitches. The 4-seam fastball is a top 12 fastball in baseball according to run value, and the changeup is a top 8 changeup in baseball according to run value. And they both do really weird things in terms of movement. We're going to get really inside baseball here for a minute. So Cole Reagans, as a lefty, the fastball and changeup both have elite horizontal movement, meaning that when they come out of Reagans' hand as a left-handed pitcher, they're going to go from right to left. They don't drop a ton. They don't have elite spin rates that way, but they move a lot. It's almost like Reagans is throwing a 2-seam fastball without the drop. That's how much his 4-seam fastball moves from right to left, which makes it really, really difficult for a right-handed hitter to face Reagans because everything is moving away from you. Typically, when you're facing a left-handed pitcher, as a right-handed hitter, stuff is coming in towards you, and that's what makes it easier to hit. That's not the case against Reagans. You're going to see the 4-seam fastball and the changeup about 60-70% of the time as a right-handed hitter, and it's going to be moving away from you. And then to left-handers, the stuff is still moving away from you because he has a slider and he has a cutter and he has a curveball, and they're all going to move away from left-handed pitchers as well. The curveball is really effective against lefties dropping down and away. So he, based on his pitch movement, he has ways to beat everybody. And so you're not really going to run into scenarios where a right-handed hitter is just going to absolutely mash against him or a lefty is just going to absolutely mash against him. Because in the starts where he has struggled this year, it's not like he gives up a ton of home runs and he's not walking a ton of guys. He has 4 starts this year where he has allowed 5 or more runs, only 2 total home runs allowed, and he has only walked 4 total guys. It's just hits. That's what the Orioles did when they knocked him out in April. They just strung hits together. It was just single, steal, fly out, double, single, strikeout, single, 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 double, single. 8 hits, 6 of them were singles, and they knocked Cole Reagans out in the second inning. It wasn't unbelievable mashing by the Orioles. It just wasn't doing too much, not chasing out of the zone, and just taking the singles where he could get them.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a lot of that today. I mean, throughout this whole series in general, I don't think it's going to be an exceptionally high-scoring game for either side throughout the whole series. But, I mean, almost 48% swing and miss on his changeup is insane.
Ridiculous.
So I think if the O's take what they learned in that second outing against Reagans in April, I mean, yes, it's a long way away, and there's been lots of changes in the lineup ever since then. But if you take that and know that you're going to receive that changeup again, just focus in on that and then go from there. So we'll see how that goes. But even then, I think with how good that Reagans is, there's still struggles there with runners in scoring position. And I think that even though this sounds simple, but the O's just need to get on base because you're really lucky to have Jordan Westburg back, especially for that, because he is one of those clutch guys that the Orioles were missing throughout kind of end of August, early September, and to have him back is going to be huge, especially for this situation where you have Reagans who does have issues with runners in scoring position. I mean, the opponent batting average in that spot is 279 as opposed to 196 when no one is on base. So that'll be huge for the O's today. Yeah,
and he's worse out of the stretch in general. When runners are on, opponents are hitting 241 versus 196 with nobody on, and a 705 OPS with runners on versus a 571 with no runners on. So if they can get some runners on, they can get him moving. That is what they did in April to knock him out of the game. It was by far his worst start of the season. And like I said, they had 8 hits in the inning. 6 of them were singles. So the Orioles really just have to take what they can get. It's not going to be a ton of mistakes, and they're not going to draw a ton of walks. They're not going to hit too many home runs off of Cole Reagans. But if you can just dink and dunk a little bit. I know that's not really the Orioles' MO, but you're right. Having somebody like Jordan Westberg batting second who just takes what the pitching gives him. He'll go the other way if he needs to. He'll hit with runners in scoring position. A guy like that back in the lineup is huge against somebody like Ragans. On the other side, though, the Orioles have Corbin Burnes, and he is really, really good. If there is another pitcher who is as hot as Cole Ragans over the month of September, it is Corbin Burnes. 5 starts in the month, a .120 ERA, opponents hitting just 194 with a 512 OPS. This is what you traded for Corbin Burnes for. Yes, the regular season was fantastic. It was one of the better regular seasons from an Orioles pitcher in recent memory. It was last year's Bradish and Messina in the 90s. That's what Corbin Burnes gave you this regular season. But this is why you got him, because the Orioles are going up against Cole Ragans, who is a bona fide ace. Corbin Burnes is one of the few pitchers in baseball that can match him. And that's why he's on the team. That's why you moved Joey Ortiz and DL Hall, to get somebody who can take the ball in game 1 of a playoff series and just go dominate.
Yeah, and this is the 3rd time this season that the two are going head-to-head.
Yeah.
I mean, both times the O's saw Ragans in April, it was also Burnes on the mound, and there weren't exceptional starts, but again, that was a long way away. So, and since then, he has found a new cutter, which is going to be huge for today, and has been in his last few starts. I mean, it's part of the reason why he was AL Pitcher of the Month, was this new cutter. And before he kind of said that his cutter was too much of just a fastball with some issues, but now he's got command on it, and that's what has been making it so successful right now and into September.
Yeah, the funny part of Corbin Burnes' slider, cutter, it is arguably the best cutter in baseball and has been for the last 4 or 5 years. And his cutter is really weird because he started throwing it accidentally. It was just a 4-seam fastball that had natural cut to it, and Burnes struggled early in his career because he was trying to make it too much like a 4-seam fastball when he should have just let it be a cutter. So Burnes will even tell you, like, yes, it's a cutter, but he just throws it like a 4-seam fastball. And there were some great articles talking about the cutter from Steve Molesky on MASNsports.com, from Andy Koska on the Baltimore Banner, basically saying that his cutter got too efficient with the spin. I'm talking a lot of inside baseball with spin rates and movements here on this podcast. That's just what I like to do. I'm a nerd like that. But anyway, Corbin Burnes with his cutter, for a while it was struggling because it was too efficient with its spin rate, meaning that it was spinning too vertically and wasn't moving enough as a cutter from right to left. And so when that happens, it just kind of sits in one place, and it's not a good 4-seam fastball. There's a reason that he started throwing it more as a cutter and just started letting it have that shape in Milwaukee. It's not a good 4-seamer. And that's why Corbin Burnes was getting hit pretty hard in the month of August, was because he was just throwing kind of a dead 4-seam fastball that didn't really move in the way that he wanted it to. But now with some mechanical tweaks, he's able to get it back to the Corbin Burnes cutter that we know and love. It's got a ton of movement on it. The velocity is good. It's going from right to left. That's how Corbin Burnes pitches. So there wasn't something completely wrong with Corbin Burnes. It was just some mechanical tweaks he needed to make here and there. He certainly was not checked out, as some fans on Twitter would like to make the assumption about. He just needed to make some mechanical tweaks. And since we saw that in September, he has been arguably the best pitcher in baseball.
He went from a 7.36 ERA in 5 starts in the month of August to 1.20 in 5 starts in September.
Yeah.
That is changing this cutter and perfecting it has been a huge contributor to why he's been so good in the last month, and how you have so much confidence starting game 1 of a playoff game for this Orioles squad, especially after everything that this team has gone through with pitching injuries this season. Yes, there were lots of injuries on the pitching front this year, but you are darn glad that Corbin Burnes was not one of them, because he is one of the top reasons this team is still afloat and a huge contender for the playoffs.
Yeah, he posts every 5th day. He gives you quality starts more often than not.
He gave birth to his wife gave birth to twins, and then he came back 2 days later and threw great games.
Yeah, he's got new twin dad strength. That's huge for Corbin Burnes. But like I said, this is why you got him. Go out and toss game 1 of a playoff series And if there is anyone that can go toe-to-toe with Cole Reagans, it is Corbin Burnes. So if you are at the ballpark today, we hope to see you at the ballpark today. I'll wave out the window from the 5th floor of the warehouse. You're going to be in for a doozy of a pitching matchup between Corbin Burnes and Cole Reagans. Maybe not a lot of fireworks on the scoreboard in terms of hits and runs, but you take that if Corbin Burnes is on the mound for the Orioles, and hopefully they can get enough done against Cole Reagans here in Game 1, because Game 1 is really, really, really important in a 3-game wildcard series. It's not a secret, but since this new wildcard format was implemented, the team that won Game 1 has won every single wildcard series. They are 8 for 8, and in 7 of those series, they have swept and won in 2. So Game 1 is really important. History would tell you that you're probably not going to win the wild card series if you don't get Game 1. Not saying it can't happen, but just saying that Game 1 is really, really important.
And I'm also kind of glad that they don't have a bye right now, because I feel like last year, obviously, that didn't work out. But this season, I think if you're using the momentum that the Orioles are coming off of in September right now, use that and keep going into this wild card series and further on into the rest of the playoffs. So
Yeah.
I think it'll be huge. I've said huge like 8 times.
It is huge. You're not wrong.
It is huge if the Orioles can use the momentum that they had, sweeping the Twins, some wins over the Yankees, series win. So
Yeah.
keep it going, O's.
And it's a good 9 out there in the lineup. Really like keeping Cedric Mullins in center field,
Me
Colton
too.
Cowser in left. They've been great in September defensively. I mean, Mullins has been mashing, so it's a good lineup. It's a great starting pitcher on the mound.
Faith in the bench, too.
Faith in the bench. Things are working for the Orioles right now. As Jordan Westbrook said this morning, the mojo is back, and we will see if that carries into Game 1 of the playoffs. Thank you for following along with our playoff coverage here on our MASN Orioles social pages on YouTube, on Facebook. Make sure you tune into MASN as well. Before the ESPN broadcast, MASN will have a pre-game show. So if you didn't get enough coverage here already, make sure you tune into MASN in just a few hours for the pre-game coverage of this Orioles-Royals Game 1 of the Wild Card Series. And stay tuned to our MASN Orioles social pages as well. We're going to keep you covered all game long. We'll be back tomorrow to preview Game 2 as well. We were hoping to do this show on the flag court if it stopped raining, so maybe we'll be there tomorrow. Who knows?
That'll be fun.
Who's to say? That would be fun. We'll see. So make sure you
But
stay
maybe
up
if
to date
there's a
with
win
us.
today, we can't change the...
That's true. If there's a win
A
today,
lot.
we might have to stay here for the mojo. We might have to stay here with your soccer bobblehead.
Yeah, my bobblehead could be the reason that the O's go all the way. O's and 2.
O's and 2. That's what the bobblehead says. But we will be back tomorrow for Game 2 coverage. Make sure you're following along with us live on Facebook and YouTube, or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on the Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Bobby Bonko behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Klaff, I am Brennan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.